Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, Ellen. How are you? Hello, Ekaterina and Andrew. Fantastic. All right, my loves. Great. Jafe is coming in. I was worried I didn't see you guys coming in for a minute, and I thought, oh no, what have I done wrong this time? Well, guys, I'm so happy to see you here, but I'm also so happy to introduce you to one of my favorite people on the planet, Mr. Gordon White of Rune Soup. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, look, I'm so happy. And as I mentioned on my Facebook page, I've been trying to get you on one of these forever because I want to show people this book. This is, yeah, this is Gordon's most recent published book, because he has another book sitting over here that I'm reading at the moment. Is it your most recent?
No, it's my first book. There are two others. There's the magic books, Chaos Protocols and Pieces of Eight. But that's the first one. And the one that's coming out is not quite its sequel, but it's in the same family.
You know why I thought this was the most recent? Because I read this in the wrong order.
No, very good. Well, yeah, that's my that's like my Egypt book, so I'm not surprised.
Yes, indeed, this is, and for all of my Egypt people, this book resets in my mind the entire system of looking at history in a way that brings history so much more richness and life and vitality, right? And makes a hell of a lot of things make a lot more sense.
Well, thank you.
Yes, so. I love it. I love it. And for you guys who are looking forward to season 3, Gordon will be starring prominently in that, talking about a lot of this material. So, my love, today, however, we are here to talk about journeying. And the reason that I wanted to talk to you about this is we have this new little project called the Animism Project. And we have lots of people who are trying to look back into past lives to recover information from those times. And I mentioned in that class that journeying is a great way perhaps to do that. But I am very much the neophyte. So I was wondering if you could explain what in your understanding journeying actually is.
Sure. So any of these things, like when you talk about, oh, I want to learn more about my past life, or what's journeying, or we have like 19th century words for it, like astral travel and so on. All of them immediately, straight out of the gate, confront you with a personal question, which is, what do you think mind is? Like, what is your theory of mind? And that is where I think, and I'm not alone in this, anyone who goes on a journey like this tends to land in a similar place. The West has got that terribly wrong. We've made the stupidest decision, I think, or landed on the stupidest conclusion any culture, anywhere, when has come to, which is that the imagination and the imaginal and thoughts are trapped inside a monkey skull, and they're not real, and they have no impact on reality at all. And it is honestly the dumbest idea. And there is no one or no culture anywhere ever that has anything like it. We are alone in this idea. And not just we're alone in this idea, we've spent the last 350 years telling everyone else they're wrong. And that's kind of a bold claim. It's a bold claim that these sort of a few 11% of the population, maybe even 5% at the time in Northwest Europe got it right. And the last 250,000 years of human history, everywhere else got it wrong. And I mean completely wrong, like they were delusional. So it's the first step is huge. And it's actually the most important one, because once you take that, then you're in the world of like, okay, well, no, I think that is dumb. So what do I actually do think is going on? And we've had people in the Western tradition, like Carl Jung would be my favorite example to go to first, of people who realized that was wrong. And so he gives us a really easy way into being with the imaginal and our thoughts so that we can begin the process of doing something like journeying, because he kind of realized the psyche isn't in us, we're in it. And so when he was doing his active imagination process, which I'll come back to because that's a really good way into journeying, he would drop into his own imaginal, and I use the word imaginal rather than imagination to distinguish, because we immediately go, when it's imagination, we put a word just in front of it and think it's fake. But the word imaginal is just sufficiently different that it jars you into thinking like, whoa, this has some kind of reality. And because you experience it, it simply does. But anyway, so here's Jung in his own imaginal collective unconscious, encountering these beings, Philemon and beings from the Old Testament. And in fact, the prophet Elijah told him that you think we're in your head, like we predate you. You've come to visit us, like you've visited our forest. Just because you're experiencing it in your mind doesn't mean anything, right? Like we're older than you and we will post-date you. We were here first. So anytime we take the psyche seriously, we encounter a realm of beings. And that's a good description of journeying. It's to take the psyche seriously, the collective unconscious, the imaginal. It literally doesn't matter what word you use for it, as long as you take that first step. And journeying is the plethora of praxis that allow access to that world. More specifically, I kind of use the word journeying on both sides. So we have inherited it in the kind of world of Western magic from the 60s and 70s neo-shamanic publishing phenomenon, Michael Hanna and even Carlos Castaneda and all that kind of stuff. So the term itself is a bit, I like it and I use it, and I even use it because it's a bit dramatic, but the term itself is almost like showing up to a party in flares. Like it's, ooh, that's a bit out of place. And it's supposed to be. It's supposed to, just like using the word imaginal, rather than using a term like astral travel, it's supposed to be jarring enough for you to sort of focus your attention on it. But that's what journeying is. It's a collection of techniques that allow you to experience the overwhelming majority of you is psyche, and the overwhelming majority of you is unconscious. And there's this tiny, tiny, tiny little sort of conscious ego component. And journeying is a way of coming into relation with all the rest of it.
So I just so you know, guys, I took a sneak peek at Gordon's journeying class at Rune Soup Member Plus website phenomenon. That's amazing. And I've been honestly trying to join up with it for about 2 years. And for some reason, I was able to do it last night. And so I had a sneak peek at a lot of the slides, and it's a very, very broad course. It's really, really fantastic. So I encourage any of you who are interested in this to dive in there. But I've been fascinated by Bernardo Kastrup's version of now this is another word, idealism. I prefer ideaism, but somehow it ended up with idealism, where, to make kind of a very short version of it, God is schizophrenic, we're the multiple personalities, and we exist within that big mind. Now, in terms of the theory of mind that you were talking about in the psyche, does that excite you, or do you see a problem with no, it doesn't excite you? Okay, what's the problem there, Joe?
It's weird because like I know Bernardo a bit, and we have plenty of people in common. It's important to say as I critique idealism, that first step, literally any other theory of mind outside of materialism is better. Okay. So I don't want anyone to like, if you resonate with idealism, go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
What I want to do is get people out of this dumb idea that thoughts are brain farts, dreams mean nothing, and you're just like slush inside a monkey skull, and it's deranged as a theory of mind. Like speaking of schizophrenia, like that is just awful, right? That said, so the tenet of idealism is that you don't have a mind, you're in mind, right? So it's very much like Jung and the psyche. What it does, every kind of religious system has a control mechanism in it, and of course, in Christianity, it's sin, and you need access to priests to absolve you of sin to get into the VIP area when you die. The version of that emerges, and it isn't there at the beginning necessarily, but emerges in Hinduisms, is that the world is an illusion, it's fake, and you need help to see it correctly. So there is a medicalization, and you said like God has schizophrenia. I don't think the universe is built broken. I don't think it is. I think I'm more shamanic in my resonance. And the idealism of Castrop, and I love it more than, and he's what I love about Bernardo is that he's extremely good at unpicking the false premises of materialism with one or two lines. So I still listen to his stuff. I've got his books. Like it's not stay away from Bernardo. It's he's right that materialism is wrong. He's wrong that idealism is right.
Okay.
I experience the universe as, you have to experience the universe as broken or requiring a medical intervention to operate in an idealism world, because this is an illusion, you're not seeing it correctly. And that is not how the wider imaginal world is experienced anywhere else. It is experienced as different. So there are frameworks of understanding in Amazonia that allow you to assert a kind of reality to things that happen in dreams that don't happen in the physical, and vice versa. And this one I think is closer. This is, it's called Perspectivism, or at least is academically, but say the Avala Runa, Amazonian people, right? They have a rule or a framework where everything that happens inside a particular realm is treated literally. And everything that happens across realms is treated metaphorically. So that when you're in the dreamlands, everything that happens there is experienced literally. When you're awake, everything that happens is experienced literally. When you wake up from sleep and you are recalling and discussing your dreams, and a lot of Amazonian people do this as a family or tribal practice of a morning, it's to share the information they've brought back from the spirit world, because it contains information, but it can't contain literal information, because it actually has to cross a dimensional divide. So they take it absolutely seriously. But if it's like, the classic, these are all wrong, but everyone kind of grew up knowing it, like, if you dream of a wedding, someone's going to die and whatever. They don't take, if it's like, oh, funny, I dreamt I was having sex with your wife last night. It's not, that might be literal in the imaginal realm, but it must be interpreted metaphorically to get the information for that realm, and vice versa, because they use ayahuasca and spirit techniques and so on to communicate back into the spirit world. And the whole point of ceremony, and I think everyone on the earth knew this for hundreds of thousands of years, and it's kind of in Starships, and it's certainly in the next book. Everyone kind of knows that. They know that if you want to communicate with the spirit realm, you don't send a text, and that's what ceremony is for. Ceremony is a way of bridging that metaphoric divide so that it lands cleanly and correctly. So that, I think, is a way of saying something like idealism, but it doesn't rely on the universe being broken or you being in error and in need of a Brahmin. And that suits my politics a lot better, for one thing.
Look, I absolutely love that. And it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that kind of flashed across the screen, because I was going at super speed, was the idea of the characters that you meet along the way. So when you were talking about sleeping with a wife in a dream, okay? In dreams, the characters that you meet are absolutely real, and they have the potential of surprising you. Yep. But I've had the dream where I'm sleeping with a neighbor, and I can't seem to go back and continue that dream if I get woken up in the middle of it, which is very disappointing sometimes. However, what's very interesting to me is when I go into, let's call it the imaginal, or in my case, I fell into a very, very deep depression recently, and I ended up doing some inner child work. And so I would consider what I did journeying, and I would consider what I did
absolutely
incredibly surprising, because there I had this entire expectation of where I was going to go to meet little Niecy, and I was about to, go down the corridor, open the door, walk in, look at her, and I got to the opening the door part, and she wouldn't let me in, right? Yeah. So the ability of those characters to surprise you in terms of your imagination, what you think is going to happen, these characters absolutely surprise you. And then you can go back to them. There is a persistence of these characters.
That's how you know you, because I'm not saying you can't, that's absolutely how you know you're having an authentic experience. And Jung said this. And people who came after him who teach the active imagination process, where he wrote his red book, which I'll come back to. The technique is as simple as this. And you can do it, speaking of the dream of having sex with a neighbor, what you can actually do is take the dream memories and use them as a path working. So you can drop into like shamanic space and return to it. And this is where Jung comes in handy, because you drop back into the end of the dream or whatever it is you wish to journey on, and you wait, and something will move. And when it moves, follow it. And you can do that with sacred art, like a mandala. You can do that with a childhood memory. You can do that with a past life memory. And you drop in and you wait for something to move and then follow it, because this is the idea of being carried along by that surprise. Because otherwise, if you drop back in, you can picture yourself having sex with someone else, and that's not the same thing. So like, how do you distinguish the difference? It's in that element of surprise. It's like, I would not, my puny human mind wouldn't have done it that way. Like I'm dealing with other beings. And that was Jung's experience when he sort of went mad and built a tower and wrote this. Well, he called it his descent into madness. I don't think he did. I think it was a shamanic crisis. And he would drop in to a dream or an image and find these things there, and he would write up what happened to him while it was going on and make these incredible paintings. And he ended up with this book he called the Red Book, which was hidden away by his family for 70 years and was only made available about a decade ago now. And it sort of serves to show that the cornerstone of modern psychology, as far as I'm concerned, was a full-blown wizard. And he was trying with his life to get psychology to be taken seriously. And so Freud did the same thing. He just tried to push some of the actual important stuff to the side, because they were dealing with a culture that was all very waistcoats and stiff upper lip and all that kind of absurdity that's gone on to destroy the world. Like, we should have stuck with the Red Book process instead. But that is a really good way of, that is the technique or the tip, not mine, Jung's, that will begin that process for you. Like, wait for something to move or follow the thing that surprises. And you might, it's sort of like bike riding. Well, for some people it is. Some people drop right in and it's miraculous, and it feels like coming home. And I love journeying. I do it as much as I can, but it feels like coming home and they're really, really good at it right away. Other people, it is a bit like riding a bike. It's like I'm second guessing myself. We've been so damaged by growing up in this broken theory of mind that people second guess themselves and need a bit of help. And eventually one of those beings, one of your guides or someone, will do something that will definitively surprise you and break you out of it and so on. But like, that's absolutely a really good way into journeying.
Look, I think that's really true. I remember the very first journey I did, and I thought it was like just, craziness. And some person wanted me to go and find my spirit animal, and we did the whole thing, and it ended up being something ridiculous, like a penguin or well, not ridiculous, but it wasn't a lion.
It's never
or
the
a
one
tiger.
you want. Yeah, it's never the one you want.
And it was like, wow, that is surprising. So that aspect is very, very true. And I agree wholeheartedly. And this is why I wanted to talk to you about. There's so much I could talk to you about, but I think that this aspect of being able to take these journeys for healing or for wisdom or for trying to obtain something from your past life is something that, until you actually do it, you can't believe that it's possible. You know what I mean? It's like,
and when you get back and you're like, wow, that was impressive. And your life changes. So you've gone somewhere real. And that, I mean, we were talking about it beforehand, but I'm a shamanic energy medicine practitioner, right? And that's the whole job, is to, shamans work at the level of the field, because you work there and that flows on or flows down into the material. That's where, so shamans don't treat disease, they arrange the conditions for healing, and that flows in, right? Journeying is a shamanic technique. It does that. And you think, wow, it's the second big confrontation. The first one is right out of the door. What is your theory of mind? And once you go, okay, well, I've improved my theory of mind sufficiently to begin testing the waters of journeying. Then the next big one is like, literally, how did lying down with some headphones for 25 minutes change my life? How I'm like, now I'm in a better relationship, or now I'm making twice the money. Like, don't journey to make more money, but it's more, you find that part of yourself that is missing, and you become more coherent and able to kind of be your authentic self in the waking. And it's profound and transformative.
In terms of the way that I would kind of explain it is like, in a similar way, but there's a missing piece. And when you find that missing piece, there's almost like a cymatic shift around you. The world kind of
Yes,
vibrates at a different response to you now that you're more of a comprehensive unit.
I
And
like
it
cymatic
just,
shift.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
happens. It's like, it's very, very surprising. But I
So
do
that
have
would be animism, right? Because animism is about coming into right relation. And that cymatic shift is falling back into right relation where before you were out of it. And that works across the whole world. That's right relation is animism. We should be in right relation with the plant kingdom and the stone people and all the rest of it. But also when we are broken, we aren't coherent and we aren't in right relation. And that cymatic shift is a really potent description of that process, because it feels vibratory, but it feels like a change of the vibration, like something like the sand moves on the plates and you go, wow. But that we would call that right relation.
That's really interesting. So coherence is right relation.
I think so. I think we experience right relation coherently. I don't think you can experience right relation incoherently. And the way animism and a lot of shamans, at least Andean shamans, conceptualize being out of right relation is there's no evil in the universe, but when you're out of right relation, that's when the universe turns predatory. And it turns predatory as a cleanup act. So that if you're out of right relation, the universe will clean that up so it can come back into right relation. So when shamans look at deforestation and pollution, it's like, well, this is gonna we're out of right relation and the universe is going to turn predatory, and we get illnesses, we get famine, we get all the kind of stuff that happens. And that, rather than it being evil, is the universe is seeking right relation, and we experience that as coherence, or we experience the opposite of it as incoherence or decoherence.
Just yesterday I was looking up grand solar minimums and how grand solar minimums create an atmosphere where lots of booga booga viruses can come down, as well as plagues and earthquakes and all of these kinds of things. It's a thing that just happens cyclically.
Yep.
So it seems like almost the universe knows we're going to get out of right relation every now and then. It needs a little because it's in the stars, right? It needs a little
It
bit of
is,
a
and grand solar minima are a good example. They always correlate with plagues, and it is the best guess is the sun is turned down low, right? And that means that you get more of that deep space radiation, which the sun usually protects us from, which is one of those things that sort of accidentally retain the sun as protector in, well, not accidentally, it's that truth is experienced imaginally in even Egyptian cultures, right? So Ra and Horus being protective and being sun gods. So when we dim the sun, we get more of this deep space radiation, which we get, and then worse nutrition because we have famines. It's colder, and this radiation appears to be deleterious to our health, which means we're more susceptible to
it creates mutations
everything.
apparently.
So
Yeah.
it's a thing that the universe does, and we know it, and we're out of right relation because we're heading in the wrong direction. You have Bill Gates literally trying to dim the sun like a Simpsons villain. And it's the absolute opposite of moving in right relation. Could otherwise be described as moving with the rhythms of the universe, right? So, and we're not doing that. It's not going to be great. It's not going to go well.
It'd be fun. Guys, if
Yeah.
you have any questions for Gordon, please pop them in the question and answers box, and we'll get to those in a little while. Sweetie, astral projection. I'm on Clubhouse a bit at the moment, and everybody's like, "Ooh, astral projection." Is that a different mechanism to journeying?
I would say no. So my positions on it, I don't make a distinction between the spirit world, the imaginal, and the dream. I think parsimoniously, dream world, spirit world, and the imaginal are the same place. Astral travel, astral flight, all of these ideas are 19th century European esoteric ideas, which is fine, except that the people like Eliphas Levi and H.P. Blavatsky and all these people who use terms like astral light and then astral travel did so because they're still downstream from the same erroneous theory of mind that we are, right? And in fact, for them, potentially it was worse because the peak of materialism, industrial imperial materialism, was in fact the 19th century. So they have to do things, they have to make artificial cuts. They have to say, of course, the things that are in your head are just fake and imagination, but astral travel is different and astral light is different, and it's different to imagining things. And so they're cutting it up. They're cutting it up because they're having these experiences that we would describe as journeying, but they're in a culture that doesn't, like, post Jung and postmodernism and everything else, I can just be like, no, I think dream and the spirit world and the imaginal are the one thing. And so I don't need to, because we've falsified that theory of mind. I'm not shadowboxing anyone who thinks that ideas are brain farts in a monkey skull. I'm not. If that's the level of conversation, I'm not interested in discussing it with you, right? Whereas in the 19th century, that was more challenging. So you can, if you resonate with it, it's better you, like if you think, I'm not really vibing with this idea of journeying, but I do like astral travel, or I do like pulling different memories out of astral light and all these 19th century techniques. If that's your jam, go for it. It isn't my jam. I read that stuff with respect, because like Blavatsky was very good at this stuff. Her descriptions haven't stood the test of time. Why would they? It's coming up on, it's 150 years later. Give her a break. So that's where I think it's unhelpful, especially now, to be like shamanic journeying is different to astral travel, is different to this, is different to that. It's like, is it? Or are these historically bound descriptions of, or attempts to solve what we were talking about before, our broken theory of mind? There's some cool stuff in it that makes me, like, Crowley had the same thing. And one of them, it's one of the few things, this is an unfair way of saying it, I think some of Crowley's best work that people don't really give him his dues for is around astral travel, or what we'd call journeying. Because he has this really clever point where it's like, well, your physical body is also fake. So why are we arguing about like whether the astral body is real or not? Your physical body, and he was using early 20th century physics, like, so just atoms and empty space. He's like, well, your physical body is fake. So why are you coming at me with, oh, the astral body's fake? It's not a differentiator. And I think that's quite clever. That's actually a clever way of saying it. But again, it's even the fact that he had to have that discussion shows that they were having out of date metaphysical discussions, which we don't need to have. So I like to bundle it all under journeying and let people, because everyone is different and everyone's experiencing the universe in their own way, let people resonate with the techniques they resonate with, and kind of have everyone share with this idea of operating out of an improved theory of mind.
First of all, I love that, because there's a lot of arguing about the finesse between what is, journeying and astral travel, and they're all getting bogged down in that rather than the big picture that, hey, you can do it. The second thing is, I love, as I'm thinking about what you're saying, the Amazonian perspective, because the problem I think that we have with the theory of mind that we have right now is that we know that a dream isn't real. And we're not making the leap that the dream is real while we're in the dream, but it's metaphoric. Correct. When we come back. Okay.
Correct.
And that is a huge, big leap to make. And I'm going to meditate on that, because I absolutely love it. But I do have a question again about the imaginal, and I have a couple of other people's questions we'll get to in a second as well. But when you were talking to Becca Tanis, which is one of my favorite interviews, and she's just such an amazing, brilliant, eloquent diamond of a person. You were talking about the territory, the terrain that was studied, through Tolkien when he was doing his journeys and all of that. Does that terrain exist for everybody? Is that terrain accessible? Does it remain there, like we have Tolkien land over here and we have my jungle place that I go to over here? I mean, is there a topography? Is there a static terrain that we can visit?
It's not static, but there is a topography. Okay. And again, Crowley would say the same, right? So when he would describe the astral realm, what I would just call the spirit realm, or the imaginal, after Henri Corbin, another person he was French and a sort of Islamic scholar and philosopher, but he coined the term mundus imaginalis, or imaginal world, right? I think that's all, and Tolkien, if pressed, would probably call it fairy. I think it's just parsimonious to consider it all the one world, and we visit the one place. Now, one of the things Crowley said, which is sort of interesting, is because this world, and you use the word static, and it's the opposite, because this realm of which we emerge from, like the majority of reality, like according to, again, going back to the Amazonian shamans, 99.9999999% of reality is the spirit realm, and we are this tiny little, right?
Yeah.
And that's all of physical reality. But this realm has as its feature changeability. So Crowley gave the example of, if I leave my body and go up through the ceiling out into the night sky and assess the weather, and I see it as raining, and it's not raining, or someone else does the same thing and sees it as windy, we come back. Someone isn't wrong there. And so it's funny, like he's describing the same thing as the Avala Runa, but I don't think as well, which is his explanation is that spirit world is so changeable that those authentic experiences still bring back truths, even if they don't coincide. Now, I know what he's getting at there, because I do a lot of journeying. I just think the Amazonian shamans describe it better, but it is that same thing. And again, it comes back to that parsimony of, I think it's all in one place. Now, it doesn't mean that everything you encounter inside your head is the spirit, right? And this is where people can resonate with different frameworks. So of course, Jung would have the collective unconscious, which we could equate to the spirit world, but you also have a personal unconscious, right? And they sort of bleed together. So stuff ends up in your personal unconscious from the collective and back into the waking world. And shamanically, you can experience that as the sort of, the limit of your being isn't physical, but it does have sort of a limit, right? And so you're kind of blending in and out, because a human is a spirit. One of the techniques, one of our spirit skills is the generation of spirit worlds. So, you are a spirit in a spirit world that can generate spirit worlds. It sounds weird, but what it means is, and Jung kind of has a good framework for it in that respect. So you can have a personal and a collective unconscious, because eventually you will need whatever distinction works for you between stuff that's in, dare I say, personal spirit world or personal imaginal, and those bigger encounters. But I don't necessarily, I think fairy, so the land that, the spirit land that clearly inspired Tolkien, is one part of this sort of like enormous multidimensional cosmos, but we can all kind of get there.
Have you got there?
To fairy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's like,
you know what we should do is set up an Imaginal Travel Center, right? Where
Absolutely.
You take us all.
Yeah. But like, I'm never not there. And I think people, this comes back to theory of mind, right? Because you are embedded your entire life in spirit/dream. And this is a real Aboriginal perspective, which is, we think of the dream world as separate and something we leave, but actually we're always in it. We just kind of temporarily move into a waking state and then go back down it. So for people who resonate with Lord of the Rings, particularly the first time they read it, it's like, this is real. This is the realest thing I've ever read.
Isn't that true?
That's an experience of fairy, and that's how you know that his contact was authentic, because it changes the physical. And this comes back to why you would journey, right? And why various Amazonian people upon waking will discuss what happened to them. And the Aboriginal version of that in some tribes is, when you wake up, you will create something. It could be something little, like moving some stones around or whistling or whatever, in response to the dream experiences you've just had in the waking world, so that the beings around you know that you're a being that can move between them. Because there is something in human destiny that requires us to improve the fidelity of contact with the imaginal world. artists know this if they don't necessarily articulate it, and writers and people who, that any creatives know that if they don't get this sort of thing out of them, they'll die. and that, where that comes from is the spirit world interacting here in the waking, and particularly when you're aligned with beings in the spirit world who have our best interests at heart, there's a very potent opportunity to make it better down here, rather than, and similarly, if you're aligned with ones that aren't, that are hostile rather than evil, it's very easy to make it worse. But generally speaking, one of the things, and Jung would describe it, maybe not using spirit, but would certainly describe it this way, is you will not reach that point of individuation until you've kind of turned a friendly face to the unconscious and kind of cohered what's down there. Because if you don't, it runs your life. It runs over your life. It collapses it. You repeat the same things. And these beings and these archetypes are a kind of real. They absolutely are. Egypt knew this as well, right? So Set is a not necessarily malefic, but a hostile and destructive being, which some of those characteristics then got kind of hoovered up into the Hellenistic or Greco-Egyptian idea of Mars and Aries, right? And so if you were enraged, the way that would be described in Egypt is that like you're semi-possessed by Set or by Mars or Aries or whenever along the timeline you want to pick it. Same thing with lust and love and maternal instinct. There's no difference between the feeling of maternal instinct and the being of a mother goddess. Because of how the Egyptians conceptualized better than we do the human form and the human experience, these beings flow through you. And that, if you don't realize that, and Western psychology didn't until people like Jung, then you are literally possessed. So to take seriously rage and lust and love as beings is, I think, psychologically healthier, right? Because it allows you to be, when it happens, you retain an awareness of, oh, I'm with Aries right now. And that might, and if you're defending yourself in a bar fight, that's great. If your husband of 25 years did something mildly annoying, and you have that, which we all do, you get that flash of like, I would like to stab you. Be like, oh, I'm with Aries right now. And it's the psychological health and healing that can come from being a human in a world of beings is there for anyone.
I love that. I mean, it really does make a difference. And the whole idea of possession, kind of in talking to Peter Mark Adams, when he even brought up that idea, I had such a shocking reaction to it. But the way that you explain it, it makes much more sense. It allows you to kind of put it over here. I'm going to put Aries over here because he's creating problems for me, rather than this. It brings consciousness to it. Really?
Exactly. You don't have to identify with your rage. You aren't enraged. You are experiencing rage. Yeah. And that's how the Egyptians would see it. This is Aries or Mars flowing through this moment in time and your life. And that's good because also subsequently, it's healthier to sit with that as not to justify yourself to the police once you've stabbed your husband, but like when you're dealing with feelings that you might deem inappropriate, there's a healthier framework there, which is like, because we've decided that all emotions and thoughts are in our head and everyone else realizes they're actually out in the world, you kind of like, it doesn't get you off the hook, but it allows you to see what's going on differently. It's like, why did it? Because everyone knows it. It's particularly with Aries, right? There is a flash of murderous rage if your partner does something. And it's not even like a real thing. It's like, why, like the coffee mug is right there. Like, and the rage is like you don't feel towards warmongers. There's this half a second of pure rage. And we have like, what is that? And there's a way of being with it that allows you to be like, ooh, glad I didn't take that any further.
Oh, I made the big mistake the other night of taking it further, and it cost me 3 hours. So I
There you
totally hear
go.
you.
There you go.
All right. So Ekaterina wants to know, when I took my first life in ayahuasca session, the shaman advised me specifically that I need to stop thinking, relax and surrender, and let the medicine to work its magic. Any cognitive processes in the brain will block the true psychedelic experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. As I've done a month in the jungle on ayahuasca dieta, and I experienced with a bunch of entheogens. My version of that, the first time I took in a ceremonial context, I always do it in a ceremonial context. First time I took a very high dose of psilocybin mushrooms down here on my farm in southern Tasmania. I'm like, okay, this was the highest dose I've ever done. This is like 14 dried grams. So I'm like, I'm going to take this seriously. So I was like, I took them ceremonially, and I'm lying down with the eye patches and the ear plugs. And I'm doing like mindfulness meditation, just waiting for it to come on. And hours went by and nothing happened. And I sort of drop into my spirits going, what's going on? How much more do I need to take? Like I've had good nights off 3 dried grams. What's happening here? And they're like, yeah, you're breathing it away. You're actually meditating it away, because of course, mindfulness meditation is a practice of like noticing thoughts and letting them pass. When you are with a medicine that can get you into the spirit world, you in ayahuasca is the best at it. You're in her hands. So that shaman gave you correct advice, but I completely understand, because I did the same thing. I'm like, right, I'm here. I'm taking this very seriously because I do think it's important, and that gets in the way. It's always the case. So yeah, especially with ayahuasca, I've had like some of the nights in the jungle, and I had to have specific shamanic help for this. Some of the nights in the jungle, I was taking the highest dose every night, and I get 5 hours in and nothing had happened. I could do a math test. 5 hours in, and I'm just sort of standing outside of the Maloka one night, and the shaman comes up to me. Obviously, he doesn't speak very good English because it's Peru. And he's like, Gordon, look at me. Are you high? And every time he did it, it sounded like a cop. Like, are you high? But he was genuinely checking, like I shouldn't be wandering around the jungle when I'm intoxicated. And I'm like, no. And he's like, walk back in. I would have delayed reactions, so that I would be reaching peak because everyone else was coming back. The medicine, yeah, it is I think the best way, especially for people who want to know in their bones that this stuff is real. Authentic ayahuasca ceremonies are the way to do it. But you are definitely in the hands of a being who knows best, even if it's not necessarily or ever what you want at the time.
The quality, okay, so I just mentioned I did a journey, and I talked to little Nisi, and I went in, and it was all very surprising because she didn't want to cooperate. When I have been doing medicines, when I've been in Amsterdam doing them legally and all of that good, safe stuff, the experience is overwhelming. And it is also undeniable. And it is also like I'm kind of in a storm, or there's just so much other stuff going around, if you know what I mean. Like it's kind of like
particularly in mushroom space. In mushroom space is windy. It's very interesting. Ayahuasca is a little different to that, but yes, mushroom space is windy. And if you're not, I find it more fun, and I got a fair amount of experience with journeying, and I have a relationship to the mushroom being and what have you. And if you just take it to see what happens, it can actually be quite pleasant, particularly psilocybin, I think. But you can also use it to find things. It's just that the mushroom doesn't have the exact same healing knowledge and skills that ayahuasca does. But consequently, it can also, although I still wouldn't recommend doing this because I do take them seriously, consequently, it's more like social. So you can actually, you can do it in an enjoyable setting. You can go out clubbing on it, or I sort of split the difference when we do mushroom ceremonies, or if I go to mushroom ceremonies, it's the first bit everyone's kind of isolated and they do their journeying thing, but then you kind of come back once you've reached the peak and you're still intoxicated and it's pleasant and you can hang out. And we do things where we lay out big buffets, because the taste of particularly like fresh fruit and things when you're intoxicated, and the way I experience that with mushroom is that the mushroom one of the reasons it likes interacting with humans is that it doesn't have a monkey body. So it doesn't have taste. Like, it doesn't know what a grape tastes like. So when you bring that awareness to the sort of subsequent experience, you're giving it back. That's that kind of returning to the spirit world, or Aini is the Quechua word for it. So there's a whole language of dealing with these beings that people can get to if they resonate with.
I know the first bite of pineapple after my first mushroom
Yeah.
trip, I just tears of joy. There was just nothing more exquisite. It's just, it's amazing that you said that. So I love that too. So it is kind of like a thank you very much. Here's your pineapple taste.
We go with them and then they come with us. And when you tell the mushroom that, it opens it up. It begins that journey. I have a solo show for the podcast, How and Why to Take Mushrooms, which is a couple of years old. But if you just Google that and Rune Soup, that episode will come up, and it gives my techniques, and it includes that kind of stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Chance kind of shamanized me into mushroom, and we were running all over Amsterdam, and I'm like, why do we need pineapple? Why do we, I had no idea. Let's just eat the mushrooms, God damn it. But yeah, it was very, very special, very, very special experience. Okay, anonymous attendee would like to know, can other magical techniques, sigils, etc., be used for getting better at journeying, or are they fundamentally different modes?
No, I think, and sigils is the best example, right? Because journeying is kind of like bringing things back from the unconscious, and sigils is sending stuff into it. So imaginal, unconscious, whatever you want. I think they are, they're traffic on the same road going in different directions, specifically sigil magic. So you can indeed, I do sigil magic for things like being good, doing sigils to get good at sigil magic, or doing sigils to get good at journeying. And like, you get in this sort of like climate change loop or something, I don't know. And so, yes, that's a really good one. The absolute best thing you can do to not just get good at journeying is, well, it's twofold, but it's the one technique. It's to realize you do it every night anyway. And that you're never more than, certainly you can get deeper in it, do 20 minutes of drumming and go, prone, but you are never more than a few seconds away, particularly once you have experience in it, of just kind of dropping in, right? So to get good at that, a dream journal will change your life. And that is, again, that's a Jungian idea of turning a friendly face to the unconscious, because the more you journal, the better your recall will be, but you will also see what Aboriginal Australia and Amazonian nations and the Ojibwe and everyone else but us has known, which is that the realms are coterminant. Like we emerge out of the imaginal realm, because you will see stuff, and I don't just mean like you will remember things that have happened from a dream, but you will know on that inner knowing level, which is that imaginal level, that there's a thing that happened that's in resonance to a dream. It's like, God, that was like this. And it's almost like we're having to learn a new language without a teacher, because you're aware that this language is going on, that the universe communicates like this. And we can kind of even just notice the words as they're going on, but there's nothing quite as good as a dream journal for getting good at journeying, because it turns that friendly face to the unconscious, and you begin to recognize motifs and beings, and you just get better at it, and you're more confident in its reality the more you do that.
That the period where you are raising from sleep and to awareness, I think a lot of people might actually have some familiarity if they get their really good idea as they're just waking up, or if they're just going to sleep. That's kind of when you're drifting through the imaginal, right? And so people that might not have done this are still like, how come I always get that really good idea just as I'm waking up? Because I'll actually use that. If I have a problem, I'm like, I put it in my little temple, and I'm like, so, whenever you feel like giving me the answer, and, that morning, boom, the answer to that problem shows up.
Salvador Dali would do that. Salvador Dali would stay awake as late as possible and get really, really tired and sit in a chair, and he'd fall asleep. And as he fell asleep, his hand would hit a dish of water, which would wake him up. So and that's where he'd get some of his stuff from too. So it's kind of like, think of it as what the Avaloruna, you have to go through a transdimensional crossing to go from metaphoric to literal. And I experience that transdimensional crossing as that moment, right? So when you say you're getting that good idea, what's happening is that it's forming, it's coming out of the imaginal, and that's the process of forming it into a thing that has coherence here in the waking. So yeah, definitely take those moments seriously. That's where the good stuff is.
Wow. All right, Japheth would like to know, how might the magical function of language be willfully changed in personal reality?
Learning another language is one of them. The other would be to read Eduardo Cohn's book, How Forests Think, because he learned this, speaking of the Avalaruna, from them. But we think language is just a thing humans do, because we define language as the vocalizations that only humans make. But actually we are, and then we went around, Europeans went around the world looking for examples of language that looked like ours and didn't find any, and decided we're the only creatures on this planet that have language. Again, maybe the second dumbest idea after the theory of mind thing, but they're the same, right? Because we are the exception rather than the rule. We are, and one of his goals with the book was to deprovincialize human language. So if you spend time amongst Amazonian people, they're embedded in a semantic context where everything is communicating with everything else, including us, and we learn that language. The one thing that we have what's called, well, this is not academic distinction, but we have symbolic language, which isn't as apparent as anything else, but the symbolic language is the tiniest percentage of all languages on earth, language and communication and so on. So once you get there, to answer the question, you basically have to jailbreak the idea of language itself. And then once you're there, two things happen. You sort of freed from a lot of the language games, to use like a Wittgensteinian word. You're freed from a lot of the language games that we're stuck in the West, but you actually get a return of a sense of power in symbolic language, because it's become beautifully rare rather than oddly rare. It's a thing, and it comes back to you as a responsibility at that point. It's, I think humans, and I'm not alone in this, this is something I learned from Aboriginal Australia, like I think humans are born for ceremony. I think that's what we're for. And the fact that we have a symbolic and metaphoric capacity, I prefer metaphoric for reasons that we discussed. Like I think metaphor works better as a framing for how we deal with the different realms. But I think humans are supposed to do that. So that's how and why I jailbreak language. It's both of them in one answer.
So, sweetie, do you do ceremony, or
oh yeah,
do you be ceremony? If we're born for ceremony, or both?
It can be both. So it sort of depends on what level you're doing it. And it comes back to what we're talking about with the Egyptian conceptualization that gods like Set and Horus and Isis and whatever can flow through us. It is an upwelling. So in traditional ceremonial contexts, that's what happens. You have an obligation. Your ancestors and totemic beings and whatever come through you. And so the process of, say, corroboree or what have you, is a human participation in a more than human event. So you are doing it and you are being it, and also it breaks the world if you don't. And I also think that's true.
Well, this is my point.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, if we're living in, master materialism land right now, all of these higher order beings, Mr. Mushroom and Mr. Aries, and all of these creatures must be starving.
And we are then not in right relationship to them. And so it turns predatory, right? So the Kogi, was it the Kogi? Maybe it wasn't. It might have, anyway, the Kogi, let's just say, it might be a different people, and I'll come back to it in a sec, told Charles Eisenstein. No, it was the Dogon. I knew I'd get there eventually. West Africa, not Central America. So the Dogon told Charles Eisenstein that you think climate change is caused by, well, we didn't actually say climate change, they said climate wildness is caused by carbon dioxide. It's not. It's caused by all these sacred statues and powerful beings and things that are sitting in museums in London and Amsterdam and Chicago, because they are beings, and you have broken the web of agreements that keeps things in sort of like balance or right relation around the world. And I'm really haunted by that statement because it works on two levels. It works on more than two, but it works on two simultaneously. And the first one being the mindset change we would have to go through to go, oh my God, we should not have these things. They should go back. Across the Western world, the mindset we would have to go to for that to become a majority opinion would also come with, well, goodness, maybe we should stop filling the ocean with microplastics, because it's the same realization. So even if the Dogon told him that as you will know that the world is saved when the statues leave Amsterdam and London and go back to wherever, it works on that level. But I actually think it's also true. Like, I think it's a capital T imaginal true thing. I think one of the disastrous things that has happened, and you'll note they happened at the same time, because Europeans have actually had harvest ceremonies and all that kind of stuff, harvest festivals, up until Descartes and up until the mind-body split, right? So the good news is it's actually only 350 years ago where like the main problem landed. The bad news is, look at the damage we've done in 350 years, right? So, but I kind of think it is certainly true that if we empty the museums for the right reasons, that culture change would come with realizing the earth is a living being. But I also think it's ceremonially true. I also think we are this tiny, tiny little physical reality in this much wider context. It has to be true, right? So that's I think ceremony is what we are and what we do and what we're not doing, if that makes sense.
On a very, I don't know, on a personal level, there's so much more meaningfulness in my life when I engage in these things. I'm just happier, right? It titillates me to say thank you to the moon, or to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just these things that I do that are probably completely naive, but it gives meaning. And I think that's also a very important thing. It seems to be such a lack of meaning out in the grand scheme
It's
of
all the
things.
one up, right? If you trap the entire spirit world inside a monkey skull and call it fake, then by definition you have drained the entire universe of meaning. And that's what happened. So we still think it, even if we don't, that it's some sort of really ornate 19th century steam powered clock that's gradually winding down to the heat death of the universe. Again, stupid. That is a stupid idea that is not in anyone's experience. No one has experienced that. And we teach people one way or the other that's reality. And you set up this immediate dissociation because we experience the world as being filled with beings, right? Like, the example I use is like, okay, so is your pet a being? And people are like, well, yes, of course. I'm like, well, where are you going with it? Like, so it stops at you and your pet, and then the rest of it's a machine. Like, think about it. And the good news is these ideas are dumb. They are stupid, falsified ideas. And what I've enjoyed about my career so far is that no one argues anymore. Like, it's abnormal to think the universe has no meaning or that the spirit world is trapped inside a monkey skull. It's pathological and abnormal. And I just don't get pushback anymore. People may not go as far as to become like a shamanic permaculture, whatever I am in southern Tasmania, right? But no one would be like, no, you're wrong and deluded. I'm like, well, so if I am, there's a lot of that going around. You know what I mean? And so my point is, don't think of it as naive, or don't diminish the experience. Step into the experience of thanking and the moon, right? And whatever arises in your imaginal when you're engaging with the moon is a communication from the moon. It's the one event that is experienced externally as a human on a planet looking at the moon, and internally, which is this amazing portal or interface between you and the spirit world. And again, that is I hate it's you know what I mean by it. It's almost culturally insensitive to say that's a more indigenous way of thinking, but it is. You don't find that is the language of how we understand meaning. An inner experience is in some way related to the outer experience, particularly when they happen at the same time. It's actually pathological to say they aren't. Like, it's really odd.
Gordon, you're a joy to talk to. I could sit here and talk to you all day. And I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. Ekaterina does have a few more questions, but there's one I think. May I ask you, and then we can let you go?
Go for it.
What happens physiologically to your lung during psychedelic trips? Have you ever noticed the unusually deep, slow breathing during altered states of consciousness? And I'm asking you because you are a shaman.
That's interesting. I don't think it's just the lungs, but the lungs are more sensory than you realize. So what happens, and this is sort of like the pineapple thing, everything, doors of perception, Aldous Huxley, right? Everything changes sensorially. So you experience kind of like cleaner air when you're breathing, because you've actually become more conscious of the sensory capacity of air hitting the inside of the lungs, because it's the same as anything else. Like that, those times I would walk out of the Maloka because I wasn't high yet in the jungle. The visual experience of the stars above the Amazon, I mean, life-changing stuff, right? And hearing the little river that we were beside and all this was just incredible. And you understand why they use ayahuasca to go hunting, not at the doses I was, but you take some of that and the cosmos talks to you, and you can hear better and see better, and off you go hunting. And for me, I think that would be my answer to the lung question, is that it's if you become aware of your in and out breath, you're aware that you can in fact sense it. And I think it's that just heightened of all sensorial capacities.
All right. So, sweetie, runesoup.com is your website. Then, as part of that, there's the Rune Soup Podcast, which is how I found you originally years ago, where Gordon has some of the best interviews on the planet with some of the most interesting people. So I highly advise you. In terms of beings, check out Veda Austin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that the water is a being, for goodness sakes, and whatever, what was his name? Anyway, the Japanese scientist Veda's taken things to a whole new level. So I highly suggest you guys check out that. And then there's the members section where you can do all of these fabulous courses that you have that includes sigil and journeying. What are some of the others, John?
We've done tarot, we've done ancestors and the dead, so getting right with your ancestors, that kind of stuff. We've done grimoire magic. We just finished up, we do the members vote on a course each quarter. We just finished up an angel magic one. But if people are vibing on this, the journeying course is very comprehensive. And if you're vibing on it and you know nothing, it's $10 a month. You get access to everything. Go for it.
Oh yeah, I'm going to second that. I was surprised at how comprehensive it was. I thought I could zip through and be an expert today, but it's going to take me a little while. So thank you so much, Gordon. As I said, I love talking to you. And Magical Egypt people, chase him down, stalk him, because you will be absolutely delighted. And sweetie, I hope to see you again on here.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, darling. Goodbye, everybody.